Grace Holloway pressed her palm flat against the vault door and felt it a pulse. Not mechanical, not random. A rhythm. Like a heartbeat buried inside 3 inches of cold steel. Behind her, 25 of the most dangerous experts in Chicago held their breath. Cole Bennett, the most feared Mafia boss in the city, said nothing. She had 60 seconds before they cut it open and destroyed everything inside. She had 60 seconds to prove she wasn't just a maid. She had 60 seconds and a memory her father left behind in the metal. If this story already has you leaning forward, subscribe to this channel, follow until the very last word, and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Nobody saw Grace Holloway. That was the truth of it, plain, undecorated, and sharp as a blade. In the Bennett mansion on the north edge of Chicago, where every corridor smelled of bourbon and gunpowder, and money that had never seen a tax form. Grace moved through the rooms like a shadow that had learned to apologize for existing. She carried her mop bucket at a slight angle so it wouldn't slosh on the marble. She kept her eyes at a precise level, low enough to seem harmless, high enough to see everything. She had learned that trick from her father. Eyes at the middle, Gracie. Not the floor and not the ceiling. The middle is where the truth lives. She hadn't heard his voice in 11 years, but she still heard it every single day. The Bennett mansion had 43 rooms. Grace knew every one of them. She knew which floorboard in the east hallway groaned if you stepped on the left side. She knew that the second bathroom on the 3rd floor had a pipe that knocked 3 times every morning at 6:17 because someone had run the hot water wrong when the house was built in 1987 and nobody had ever fixed it. She knew that the large study on the ground floor, the one they called Mr. Bennett's war room, had a ventilation duct that ran directly behind the north wall, and if you stood close enough to that wall while you were cleaning the baseboards, you could hear every word spoken inside. Grace had never once let anyone know she knew any of this. Invisible people survive longer than visible ones. She had learned that from her father, too. It was a Tuesday morning when the 25 experts arrived. She was on her knees in the foyer, cleaning a scuff mark off the baseboard tile, when the convoy of black SUVs pulled through the front gate. Doors opened. Men climbed out. Some of them wore suits. Some wore tactical vests. A few carried equipment cases the size of small refrigerators, and those cases had locks on them that Grace recognized, without meaning, to biometric 3-point latch Japanese manufacture, designed originally for military hardware transport. She kept scrubbing the baseboard. A man in a charcoal suit walked past her so close she could have reached out and touched his shoe. He didn't look down. None of them did. She counted 24 of them passing through the foyer, and then a 25th older heavyset with the kind of deliberate walk that meant he was used to being the smartest person in any room he entered. Behind all of them came Marcus Webb. Marcus was Cole Bennett's head of operations, which was a polished way of saying he was the man who solved problems before Cole Bennett had to be bothered with them. He was lean and precise, and had a way of speaking that made every sentence sound like a final warning. He clapped his hands once, as the last expert filed through. Conference room B. Now. Don't touch anything in this house that isn't in that room. Nobody asked questions. Marcus had that effect on people. Grace wrung out her mop and moved toward the hallway. Holloway. She stopped. Marcus rarely used her name. The East Corridor. Full clean. We need it spotless before 11. Yes, sir? He was already walking away. She picked up her bucket and went to the East Corridor. The East Corridor was the one that led to the basement stairs. Grace had never been allowed in the basement, not in 3 years of working in the Bennett mansion. There was a door at the bottom of those stairs that was always locked, and there was always at least one guard stationed at the top of the stairs, sometimes 2. She had cleaned around those guards hundreds of times, mopped the floor around their feet, emptied the small trash bin beside the stairwell door. And every time she got close to that stairwell, she felt something. A sound. Not a loud sound. Not a mechanical rumble or a hum of electricity. Something smaller. Something almost musical, except it wasn't music. It was the ghost of a pattern. A rhythm that didn't quite complete itself, like a song that stopped before the last note. She had felt it for 3 years. She had never told anyone. She cleaned the east corridor. She did it slowly, methodically, the way she always did. Everything, not because she was careless, but because careful was the only speed she had ever been able to afford. When you grew up the way Grace grew up in a 2-room apartment in Pilsen with a genius father who spent more time taking apart engines than paying electric bills, you learned that slow and careful was the difference between things working and things falling apart. Her father's name was Henry Holloway. He had been, by every measure Grace had ever understood, a man out of his time. He could hear mechanical systems, the way musicians hear chords. Not as individual parts, but as a whole, a language, a conversation between moving pieces. He worked as a machine shop foreman and was paid a foreman's wages, but the men he worked with, and the men above those men, knew what he was actually worth. They knew what he could do with a broken piece of machinery that 4 other men had already declared unfixable. They knew what he could hear inside a steel casing that no one else could detect. He disappeared when Grace was 14. The police report said he walked out of his shop one Thursday evening and never came home. There was no evidence of foul play. There was no body. There was no note. There was just absence. A shape cut out of the world in the exact form of her father, and 11 years of living around that shape without ever understanding what made it. She mopped the east corridor floor. The guard at the stairwell door shifted his weight. He was bored. She could tell by the way he kept looking at his phone and then remembering he wasn't supposed to look at his phone and putting it back in his pocket. From somewhere far below, the sound pulsed again. Rhythm. Pattern. Almost music. Grace kept mopping. She heard about the vault for the first time that afternoon. Not intentionally. She was cleaning the brass fixtures on the wall sconces in the hallway just outside Conference Room B, and the door was not fully closed, and the voices inside were not being kept particularly quiet because the men inside assumed that the woman with the cleaning cloth was not worth lowering their voices for. Tried every method on record. Thermal. Acoustic. Chemical override. The damn thing doesn't respond to any standard cracking protocol. Because it wasn't built to a standard protocol. That was a different voice. Older, impatient. The Iron Saint was custom, one-of-a-kind build. Whoever designed the internal mechanism never filed documentation anywhere. We have no schematics. We have no reference model. We have nothing. So 25 of the best vault specialists in the country and we have nothing. That voice Grace recognized. Marcus Webb. Clipped. Furious. Mr. Bennett is going to want an explanation. Mr. Bennett is going to want results, which are 2 different things. The old voice again. I don't have results. I have a vault that's been sitting under the Marlowe Bank for 30 years that no one has ever opened, and that is built around a mechanical system I have never in 40 years of this work seen or heard described. A pause. It hums, the old voice said. Quieter now. Almost private. The internal mechanism hums, like it's alive, and I don't know what that means. Grace's cleaning cloth stopped moving, like it's alive. She made herself start moving again, slow, careful. She finished the sconce and moved down the hallway without hurrying because hurrying attracted attention, and she had survived 3 years in this house by never once attracting attention. But her heart was doing something she hadn't felt in a long time. It was racing towards something she couldn't yet see. She was in the kitchen eating her dinner. The staff ate in shifts quick and functional, standing at the counter when Cole Bennett walked in. He never came to the kitchen. In 3 years, Grace had never once seen him in the kitchen. It wasn't where he lived. Cole Bennett lived in spaces where the furniture cost more than her father's annual salary, and where the lighting was always low enough to be flattering, and the temperature always controlled to within 2 degrees. He was a man who had arranged his environment so completely that the ordinary mechanical facts of life, cooking smells, dish sounds, the noise of a refrigerator cycling on, were handled by other people somewhere he didn't have to witness it. He stopped in the doorway. He looked at her. She looked at him. For exactly 3 seconds, they occupied the same room as equals two people in a kitchen, one of them holding a fork, and the other one clearly looking for something he hadn't found yet. Then his eyes moved past her. He crossed to the counter, opened a cabinet, took out a glass, and poured himself 2 fingers of water from the filtered tap. He stood there drinking it with his back to her. "You've been here 3 years, he said. She set her fork down. "Yes, sir. Marcus says you're reliable." "I try to be." He turned around. He was, in Grace's private estimation, a man who had been put together with unusual care, tall, sharp-featured, the kind of face that looked like it had been designed to be unreadable, and had succeeded. His eyes were the color of the lake in November, cold, deep, currently focused on her with an attention she had never experienced from him before and wasn't entirely sure what to do with. "Do you know what's happening in Conference Room B?" he asked. "I clean the hallways, Mr. Bennett. I don't listen to what goes on in the rooms." Something moved across his face, not quite a smile. "That's a very precise answer. I try to be precise too." He put the glass down on the counter. He looked at her for another moment, the kind of look that was actually an assessment, the kind she recognized because her father had done it with machines, taking inventory, calculating unknowns. "Go finish your dinner," he said. He left. Grace picked up her fork again. Her hand was completely steady. But inside something had shifted. Something small and tectonic, the way a single misaligned gear can change the timing of an entire engine. Cole Bennett had seen her. In 3 years of carefully, deliberately, methodically being invisible, Cole Bennett had looked at her and actually seen her. She didn't know yet if that was the best thing or the worst thing that had ever happened to her. She found out about the vault's location that night. Not from eavesdropping. From the pipes. The Bennett Mansion's plumbing was old, late 80s installation, partially updated, but not fully, and old plumbing carries sound in ways that modern systems don't. It conducts conversation through water like a low-grade telephone line. Grace had learned this in her first month working in the house and had spent 2 years 9 months deciding it wasn't her business. But that night, lying on her narrow bed in the staff quarters on the 3rd floor, she heard Marcus Webb's voice traveling up through the pipes with unusual clarity because he was angry, and angry men do not manage their volume. "The Marlowe Bank Vault has been the only job that actually matters, and you're telling me these people flew in from 6 different states and not one of them can crack it." A lower voice she didn't recognize. Placating. Making excuses. "I don't want reasons," Marcus said. "I want that vault open before the end of the month. Mr. Bennett has waited long enough. Move the schedule. We go in Thursday." Grace stared at the ceiling. The Marlowe Bank. She knew the Marlowe Bank. Everybody who had grown up in that part of Chicago knew the Marlowe Bank. It was old Chicago, old everything. A building that had been a bank since 1931 and looked like it knew it. Granite exterior, deep lobby. The kind of place that had survived 3 ownership changes and still somehow smelled the same inside. She also knew something nobody else in that house knew. She knew it because of a story her father had told her when she was 12 years old, sitting at his workbench while he cleaned a clock mechanism he'd been given to repair his hands, moving with the careful tenderness he reserved for precision instruments, and his daughter, and almost nothing else. "I worked on something once," he had said, "that I wasn't supposed to talk about. But I want you to understand something about how mechanical systems carry memory. A good mechanism doesn't just function, Gracie, it remembers. It keeps the signature of the person who built it. Like handwriting, like a voice. If you know how to listen." He had stopped there. She had asked him what he built. He had smiled. That particular smile, private, complicated, slightly sad. "Something that will last a long time," he had said. "Something that will only open for someone who knows its language." Grace lay in the dark and felt the almost sound pulse from somewhere below, through the walls, through the floor, through the bones of the building. Like it's alive. She closed her eyes. Her father's voice. The vault's rhythm. Thursday. She had 3 days to decide whether to keep being invisible, or whether to finally at long last be seen. She chose to be seen on Wednesday night. She didn't plan it. Planning implied that she had thought it through to a logical conclusion and decided the outcome was acceptable. What she did was different. It was the specific kind of decision that lives in the body before it reaches the brain, the kind her father used to describe as listening to the machine instead of the manual. She went to Marcus Webb's office at 9:30 at night and knocked on the door. He opened it and looked at her the way you look at something that has appeared in a place it has no business being. "Holloway, what are you doing here?" It wasn't a question, it was a classification. "I need to talk to you about the vault," she said. Silence. Marcus Webb had in Grace's experience a very controlled face. He did not show surprise easily. He did not show surprise at all usually. But something happened in the half-second after she said those words that she recognized as surprise being forcibly suppressed, which was almost more interesting than surprise itself. "Come in," he said. His voice was completely flat. She came in. He closed the door. He stood in front of his desk with his arms crossed and looked at her with an expression she could only describe as forensic, like he was examining evidence and trying to determine if it was real. "Talk," he said. "The vault in the Marlowe Bank," she said. "The one they're calling the Iron Saint. I think I know why 25 experts couldn't open it. And you know this because I've heard it." A pause. "You've heard a vault you've never been near. I've heard its frequency, the pattern it runs. It comes through the foundation at a particular resonance." She stopped. "Started differently. When my father was a machinist, he built systems that used frequency-based locking, not electronic, mechanical. The internal components are arranged to recognize a specific sequence of vibration applied externally in a specific rhythm. To someone who doesn't know that the mechanism looks like it has no entry point, because it doesn't have a conventional one." Marcus said nothing. "The 25 experts are looking for a key," Grace said. "There isn't one. There's a language. And you have to speak it in the right order, or the mechanism locks down permanently." "How do you know any of this?" She looked at him directly. "Because I think my father built it." The silence in the room changed quality. It became the kind of silence that has weight. Marcus uncrossed his arms. He walked to his desk. He picked up his phone and he made a call, and when the call connected, he said only 4 words. "Sir, you need to hear something." Cole Bennett listened to her for 11 minutes without speaking. He sat behind his desk with his hands flat on the surface and his November eyes on her face, and he listened to every word she said with the particular quality of attention that Grace associated with people who had spent their lives making decisions that cost other people their lives. The kind of attention that is not passive. The kind that is taking everything apart and examining each piece and calculating what it's worth. When she finished, he said, "Why are you telling me this? Not how do you know this? Not prove it. Not you're a maid. Why should I believe you? Why are you telling me this?" "Because the vault is going to be destroyed if someone doesn't stop Thursday from happening the way it's planned," she said. "And whatever is inside it," she paused, decided. "Whatever is inside it, I think it has something to do with my father. And I need to know where my father is." Cole Bennett looked at her for a long time. "Your father disappeared 11 years ago," he said finally. "Yes. How did you know to come work here?" It was the right question. She had been waiting for it. "I didn't," she said. "I came here because it was a job that paid enough to live on. I stayed because of the sound." The sound. The frequency. The pattern. "I heard it the first week I worked here. I knew what it meant." She paused. "I just didn't know if I was ready to do anything about it." "And now you're going to destroy it on Thursday," she said. "So I'm out of time." Cole Bennett stood up. He was taller than she remembered from the kitchen. Or maybe he just occupied space differently when he was making a decision. "Thursday is postponed," he said. He wasn't talking to her. He was talking to Marcus, who was standing at the door. "Get the team ready for a new approach. Different timeline." He looked at Grace. You'll need to demonstrate what you're describing before I move 20 men and change a plan that's been 3 months in development. I understand. If you're wrong, I'm not wrong. He looked at her again, that inventory look, taking her apart, calculating. No, he said slowly. I don't think you are. Grace Holloway stood in the office of the most dangerous man in Chicago, with her cleaning uniform still on, and her mop bucket 2 floors up, and the ghost of her father's voice humming in the back of her skull, and for the first time in 11 years, she did not feel invisible. She felt like the only person in the room who knew the combination. And the vault was still waiting. Marcus Webb did not sleep that night. Grace knew this because she didn't sleep either, and the pipes in the Bennett mansion were honest about everything, whether you wanted them to be or not. She heard him pacing. She heard 2 phone calls, short-clipped, the kind of calls where the person on the other end doesn't get to ask questions. She heard him pour something from a bottle at 2 in the morning, which was the first time in 3 years she had heard Marcus Webb do anything that suggested he was human enough to need a drink. She lay on her back and stared at the ceiling and thought about her father. Henry Holloway had not been a complicated man. He had been precise, which people sometimes mistake for complicated. But precision is actually the opposite of complicated. It's the discipline of reducing everything to its essential function. He fixed things. He understood things. He heard the language inside mechanical systems the way Grace imagined musicians heard harmony not as separate notes, but as a single living conversation between moving parts. He had also been, she understood now in ways she hadn't as a 14-year-old girl, a man who knew things he wasn't supposed to know, who had been asked to build things and then asked to disappear quietly afterward. She had been too young to recognize it then. She recognized it now because she had spent 3 years in Cole Bennett's house, and Cole Bennett's house had taught her what it looked like when men with power needed something built and then needed the builder gone. At 5 in the morning, she got up dressed and went to the east corridor. The guard at the stairwell was different from the night shift, younger, newer, the kind of young that still thought standing straight made you look more dangerous. He straightened when he saw her coming. "Kitchen delivery?" she said, holding up the small tray she'd prepared. "Coffee, a wrapped roll." "Mr. Webb asked for early breakfast." The guard looked at the tray, looked at her, looked at the tray again. "Mr. Webb's office is the other direction." "I know that," Grace said. "I've worked here 3 years, but he asked me to check the lower-level thermostat first because he thinks the heating's off down there and he doesn't want the equipment getting cold." She held his gaze without blinking. "You can call him and confirm if you want. He's been awake since midnight, so I'm sure he'd love to hear from you." The guard did not call Marcus Webb. He stepped aside. Grace went down the stairs. She had never been below the first level of the Bennett mansion, but she had heard it through the pipes and the walls for 3 years. And she had built a map of it in her mind, the way her father had taught her to build maps of systems she couldn't directly see, from sound, from vibration, from the way space changes pressure when it's been enclosed for a long time. The basement was larger than the footprint of the house suggested. The corridor turned left. There was a room on the right that smelled of generator fuel. There was another room behind a steel door that was padlocked from the outside, which meant whatever was inside, it wasn't a person and wasn't meant to leave. And at the end of the corridor behind a door that was heavier than it looked was the room they used as a monitoring station. Inside that room was equipment she recognized. Acoustic analysis hardware. Frequency readers. The kind of instruments that cost more than most people's annual income, and that 25 experts had brought in their biometric locked cases from 6 different states. She set the tray down on a table nobody was using. She put her hands on the acoustic reader and closed her eyes. And she listened. The frequency was clearer down here. Not louder, more resolved the way a radio signal clarifies when you move the antenna to exactly the right position. It came from the northwest, which meant it was coming from the direction of the Marlowe Bank 3 blocks away, traveling through the foundation substrate, diminished but unmistakable. The rhythm was a 7-beat pattern with an irregular accent on the 3rd and 6th beats. It wasn't random. Nothing her father built was ever random. It was a signature. His signature. She pressed her fingertips against the reader's surface and let the rhythm move through her, and for exactly 40 seconds, she was 14 years old again, and sitting at his workbench while he explained the philosophy of mechanical memory, and the grief of it was so sudden and so total that she had to breathe through it carefully, the way you breathe through pain, not resisting it, just making room. Then she opened her eyes. She picked up the tray and went back upstairs. The guard didn't look at her when she passed. She had what she needed. The vault was not just her father's work. It was his message, and it had been waiting 11 years for someone who spoke his language to come and read it. The question now was whether Cole Bennett would let her get close enough to answer. She found out at 7:30 that morning when Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway while she was eating breakfast and said without preamble, "Mr. Bennett wants you in the war room at 8. She nodded. He turned to go, then stopped. Holloway. He didn't turn around. Whatever you think you know about that vault, you better be right, because Mr. Bennett doesn't do second chances. I know, she said. No, Marcus said. You don't, not yet. He left. She finished her coffee. It tasted like copper, which was what her mouth did when she was scared and refusing to show it. Her father had called it the taste of discipline. She had called it the taste of survival. They were probably the same thing. She washed her cup, set it on the rack, went upstairs to change into something that wasn't a cleaning uniform, because if she was going to walk into Cole Bennett's war room at 8 in the morning and tell him things that 25 experts had missed, she was going to do it in her own clothes and on her own terms. She owned exactly 3 things that weren't work clothes. She put on the dark gray one and went downstairs. Cole Bennett was already in the war room when she arrived, and he was not alone. There were 4 other men in the room she didn't recognize, and one, she did, the old man with the deliberate walk who had been last off the convoy of SUVs. He was sitting at the far end of the table with his arms crossed and his expression set to something between professional skepticism and active contempt, which Grace recognized as the particular face that people who have spent 40 years being the smartest person in the room make when someone suggests they might have missed something. Sit down, Cole said. She sat. This is Gerald Marsh, Cole said, nodding toward the old man. He's been working vault systems for 4 decades. He's the one who told me last night that the Iron Saint cannot be opened by any method currently known to this field. That's still true, Marsh said without looking at Grace. Tell him what you told me, Cole said to Grace. She told him. She kept it clean and technical, and she did not apologize for knowing what she knew or being who she was, because apology was what invisible people did, and she was done with that. She explained the frequency-based locking mechanism. She explained the 7-beat signature pattern. She explained why every method the experts had tried would either have no effect or trigger the lockdown protocol. And she explained it using the specific terminology her father had used at his workbench in Pilsen when she was a girl. Terminology she had spent 11 years carrying inside her like a language she'd never had anyone to speak to. When she finished, Marsh was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Who are you?" Not hostile. Something else. Something almost careful. My name is Grace Holloway. My father was Henry Holloway. He was a machinist and a mechanical systems designer who disappeared 11 years ago. I believe he built the Iron Saint. Another silence. Longer. Henry Holloway, Marsh said slowly. You know the name, Cole said. It wasn't a question. Marsh looked at Cole and then at Grace and then at the table, and the look on his face was something Grace had never seen before on a man of his type. It was the look of a person who has just discovered that a thing they thought was safely buried has come up through the ground. I knew the name, Marsh said carefully. A long time ago, in connection with a private commission, 30 years ago approximately. The client was not disclosed to me at the time. But you heard of the work, Grace said. I heard rumors. In this industry, there are always rumors. Someone had designed a vault that used mechanical frequency recognition instead of electronic or combination systems. No documentation. No schematic. One of a kind. The people who were talking about it called it impossible. He paused. I didn't believe them then. I believe it now. Cole leaned back. Can she open it? Marsh looked at Grace. The contempt was gone from his face. In its place was something Grace recognized after a moment as respect, the kind that costs a man something because he has to give it to someone he didn't expect to give it to. If what she's describing is accurate, Marsh said, then she may be the only person on this earth who can. The room was quiet. One of the men Grace didn't recognize shifted in his chair. Cole's eyes moved to him and then back to Grace, and she saw in that movement the entire social geometry of the room, the way Cole processed information, cross-referenced it against whatever he already knew, and arrived at decisions faster than most people finished formulating questions. It was, she thought, not entirely unlike the way she heard mechanical systems. Different language, same underlying process. Thursday is still the date, Cole said. New approach. She leads. Sir, Marcus started. She leads, Cole said again. Same tone. Conversation over. Grace nodded once. She didn't smile. Smiling would have been wrong in that room at that moment. She simply nodded the way her father had nodded when someone trusted him with a piece of machinery they needed fixed, accepting the weight of it without performance. I'll need to be inside the vault room, she said. Not outside, not monitoring remotely. Inside with my hands on the door. That can be arranged, Cole said. And I need the experts out. All 25 of them. I need the room empty except for 2 people of your choosing. Marsh made a sound that might have been outrage or might have been a laugh. You want to remove 25 credentialed specialists. They'll trigger the lockdown, Grace said directly. 25 people in that room means 25 different vibration signatures plus equipment interference. The mechanism is sensitive. It's designed to read one signal and lock everything else out. You put 25 people and their equipment in that room, and you will never open that vault. She looked at Marsh. That's why it hasn't opened. Not because they couldn't find the method, because the environment was poisoning the signal. Marsh opened his mouth, closed it, looked at his hands. She's right, he said quietly. God help me, she's right. Cole looked at Grace for a long moment. That same inventory assessment from the kitchen from the war room the night before. But something about it was different now. Less calculating. More like the look a person gives something they have underestimated and are revising their understanding of in real time. Thursday, he said. 8 a.m. You and 2 of my people. Nothing else. Thank you, she said. She stood to go. Holloway. She stopped. Why did you come work in this house? Cole asked. The real reason. Not the job. Not the money. She turned around and looked at him. The whole room was listening. She was aware of every set of eyes on her, and she made herself stay in her own skin, not retreat, not deflect, not give the invisible girl answer. Because the sound led me here, she said. I've been following my father's signal for 3 years without knowing it. The frequency travels through the foundation substrate, and it's strongest in the east corridor of this building because this building sits on the same geological stratum as the Marlowe Bank. She paused. I didn't choose your house, Mr. Bennett. His work chose it for me. Cole said nothing. She left. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall for exactly 10 seconds with her eyes closed, and her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her teeth. Then she pushed off the wall and walked to the linen closet and got out a fresh set of cleaning supplies, because it was 8:45 in the morning, and the third-floor bathrooms weren't going to clean themselves, and she still needed this job for 2 more days. She was halfway through the second bathroom when the knock came. Not Marcus. Not Cole. Someone she'd never seen before, young female sharp-eyed in a suit that said law enforcement to every instinct Grace owned, even though there was no badge visible. Ms. Holloway, the woman said. My name is Agent Reyes. I need 5 minutes. Grace looked at her. DEA. A slight pause. Treasury. How did you get in this house? Mr. Bennett's security let me in. A beat. Which should tell you something about how far up this conversation goes. Grace set down her cleaning cloth. 5 minutes, she said. Agent Reyes was not there to arrest anyone. She was there because the Treasury Department had been trying to access the contents of the Iron Saint for 9 years, and had gotten exactly as far as everyone else, which was nowhere. She was there because someone inside a federal task force had run the name Henry Holloway through a database 3 weeks ago, not at her request. She was careful to specify, and a flag had come up that she wasn't at liberty to explain in detail, but that had sent her to Chicago on a direct flight the following morning. What kind of flag? Grace said. The kind that means your father's disappearance isn't in the category of unsolved missing persons, Reyes said. It's in a different category. What category? Reyes looked at her steadily. Protected witness relocation, except the relocation wasn't voluntary. Grace's hands went still. Someone moved him, Reyes said quietly. Someone with enough reach to scrub the record and reclassify it. And whoever did that, they didn't do it to protect him. They did it to make sure he couldn't tell anyone what he built or who he built it for. The sound came through the wall at that exact moment, faint, rhythmic, the 7-beat pattern she had been hearing for 3 years, and Grace felt it the way she always felt it in the center of her chest, like a second heartbeat. Victor Cross, she said. Reyes went very still. You know that name, Grace said. Where did you hear it? I haven't heard it anywhere, Grace said. Not yet, but my father talked about a commission he couldn't discuss. He talked about building something for someone he was afraid of. He never said the name, but it's the only name in this city that would make a federal agent go that still when someone says it out loud. Reyes looked at her for a long measuring moment. Victor Cross has been untouchable for 30 years, she said finally. He operates behind enough layers of corporate infrastructure that direct connection is nearly impossible. He's not a mafia boss. He's not a crime figure in any conventional sense. He's a man who controls the information that other powerful men need, and he charges accordingly. She paused. If your father built something for Victor Cross and then disappeared, your father saw something he wasn't meant to see. And whatever is inside that vault is either the proof of what he saw or the leverage Cross has been using to keep the people who know silent. Grace sat with that for a moment. Or both, she said. Or both, Reyes agreed. Outside the bathroom window, Chicago was doing what Chicago did, moving loud, relentless, indifferent. Grace thought about her father's hands on a workbench. She thought about a 7-beat rhythm traveling through bedrock for 3 decades waiting for someone to hear it. She thought about Cole Bennett's November eyes doing their inventory of her, and about 25 experts who had failed because they'd been listening for the wrong thing, and about a federal agent sitting on the edge of a bathtub in a Mafia mansion, telling her that her father's disappearance was not a disappearance at all, but a deliberate erasure. What do you want from me? Grace asked. I want you to open the vault, Reyes said. And I want you to tell me everything that's inside it before Cole Bennett's people have a chance to move it. Grace looked at her. And what do I get? Reyes met her eyes without blinking. Your father's real location. The 7-beat rhythm moved through the wall. Grace heard it the way she always heard it, not as sound, but as something closer to blood, closer to bone, closer to the particular frequency of a grief that had been waiting 11 years for a frequency to answer it. Thursday, she said. Thursday. Reyes agreed. And just like that, Grace Holloway was no longer a maid in a Mafia mansion navigating the space between 2 dangerous men. She was the only person in Chicago standing at the exact center of a 30-year secret, with her father's voice humming in the walls, and 2 entirely different kinds of power waiting to see what she would do with it. She picked up her cleaning cloth. She finished the bathroom. She was going to need to think very, very carefully about Thursday. Grace did not sleep Wednesday night either. She lay on her back in the staff quarters and ran the sequence through her mind, the way her father had taught her to run mechanical problems, not forcing it, not pushing toward an answer, but letting the components settle into their natural relationships, the way gears find their mesh when you stop forcing them and let the tolerance do its work. The 7-beat pattern. the irregular accent on the third and sixth beats, the way the mechanism would read external vibration and either recognize it or reject it, and if it rejected it 3 times in sequence, the internal lockdown protocol would engage and the Iron Saint would become permanently, irreversibly sealed. She had one attempt. That was the thing nobody in that war room had fully understood yet, because she hadn't told them. She had told them the truth about everything else: the frequency system, the vibration signature, the environmental interference. But she had held that one detail back, not out of deception, but out of something more practical. If Cole Bennett knew she had exactly one attempt, he would put 20 men in that room with her, and the pressure would become the kind that breaks things. She needed to go in believing she could do it. That was different from going in knowing she had to. Her father had told her that too. Confidence isn't the absence of fear, Gracie. It's the decision to function inside of it. At 3 in the morning, she sat up, turned on the small lamp on her nightstand, and wrote out the sequence on the back of a grocery receipt because it was the only paper she could find. 7 beats. Accent pattern. The specific quality of vibration required not just rhythm, but resonance, which meant she couldn't tap it with her fingers. She had to use her palms, flat contact maximum surface area, the way her father had pressed his hands against an engine casing when he was listening to it. She wrote it all out, and then she folded the paper and put it in her pocket where it would stay until she either needed it or didn't. Then she lay back down and stared at the ceiling until the gray light started coming through the window, and Chicago woke up around her, indifferent as always. She got up, got dressed. Gray clothes again, not the cleaning uniform. She was done with the uniform. She went downstairs. Marcus was in the kitchen. This was new. Marcus did not eat breakfast in the kitchen. Marcus ate breakfast wherever Marcus ate breakfast, which was not a place Grace had ever been invited to observe. But he was there standing at the counter with a cup of coffee in one hand and his phone in the other, and when she walked in, he looked up at her with an expression she hadn't seen on him before. It took her a moment to identify it. Then she had it. He was worried. Not about her, not about the vault. About something else. Something the phone had told him. Something that had put new lines around his mouth since the last time she saw him. "Something happened," she said. Not a question. He looked at her for a moment. Made a decision. One of the perimeter cameras picked up a vehicle at 2 this morning, parked 3 blocks east for 40 minutes and then left. No plates. "Victor Cross," she said. Marcus didn't react the way Reyes had reacted. He reacted the way people react when they hear a name they've been dreading for a long time. Not surprise, but the specific exhaustion of a fear confirmed. "Where did you hear that name?" he said. "Same place I hear everything in this house," she said. "You'd be amazed what the walls carry." He put his coffee down. "Mr. Bennett needs to know you said that name." "Mr. Bennett already knows that name," Grace said. "The question is whether he knows Cross has been watching this house since before Thursday was scheduled." Marcus looked at her with something shifting behind his professional blankness, a recalculation she recognized, the same kind Cole did, but slower, more deliberate, the way a careful man moves when the ground has changed under him. "How do you know that?" he said. "Because the camera picked up the vehicle at 2 this morning," Grace said. "But the frequency interference I detected in the monitoring room yesterday wasn't random equipment noise. Someone has been running a low-signal disruptor on the acoustic readers from outside this property, which means they've known about the acoustic approach for at least 72 hours. She paused. "They've been ahead of every move this house has made. And the only reason they do that, instead of just taking the vault themselves, is that they can't open it either." Silence. "They need me," Grace said. "Or someone like me. And Cross knows it." Marcus picked up his phone. He made a call. He said 3 words, "Get him up." Cole Bennett came downstairs in 7 minutes, which was fast for a man who moved through his house like every room owed him patience. He came in still buttoning his shirt, and his eyes went directly to Grace before they went anywhere else, which told her that Marcus had given him enough in those 3 words to know where the conversation was going to start. "Talk," he said. She talked. She told him everything she'd told Marcus, and then she told him about Reyes, and she told him about the offer Reyes had made, and she watched his face while she told him. And his face did a remarkable thing. It stayed completely still, while everything behind it moved at speed. Processing, cross-referencing, arriving at conclusions before she finished forming sentences. When she stopped, he said, "She offered you your father's location." "Yes." "In exchange for access to the vault contents before my people can secure them." "Yes." "And you're telling me this instead of taking the deal?" Grace looked at him directly. "I'm telling you this because Cross is going to move before Thursday, and we both need to know that. Whatever deal I make or don't make with a federal agent is secondary to the fact that someone with 30 years of reach and zero compunction has been running surveillance on this property and is going to make a move for that vault." Cole was quiet for a moment. "What kind of move?" he said. "I don't know," she said. "But if I were him, if I were a man who had kept a 30-year secret by removing every person who knew too much, I wouldn't try to open the vault. I'd try to make sure it could never be opened." She let that sit for a second. "Thursday can't be Thursday anymore. We need to move today." The room went very quiet. Marcus said, "That's not possible. The logistics alone." "Marcus." Cole's voice was flat. "End of that sentence." Marcus stopped. Cole looked at Grace. "If we move today, are you ready?" She thought about the receipt in her pocket. The sequence she'd written at 3 in the morning. The 7-beat pattern she'd been hearing in her bones for 3 years. "I've been ready for 11 years, she said. Cole nodded once. He looked at Marcus. "Move the convoy. We go at noon." The next 4 hours were the most controlled chaos Grace had ever witnessed, and she had grown up in a household where her father once rebuilt a transmission in their living room over a holiday weekend. So her baseline for controlled chaos was not low. Cole's people moved like a machine that had been waiting to be switched on. 12 men, 2 vehicles equipment that appeared from locked rooms she hadn't known existed. Communications checks conducted in a shorthand she couldn't fully follow but recognized as the language of people who had done dangerous things together enough times that they'd stopped needing full sentences. She stayed out of the way. She watched. She memorized. At 10:30, Gerald Marsh appeared at her elbow. He didn't say anything for a moment. He just stood next to her and watched the activity with the expression of a man who has revised his entire framework for a situation and is still in the process of adjusting to the new one. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. "You don't," she said. "I dismissed you in that room yesterday morning, before you'd said 3 sentences. You'd spent 40 years being right about vault systems," Grace said. "That earns you the initial assumption." He looked at her sideways. "You're very generous for someone we all ignored." "I'm practical," she said. "Being angry at people for not seeing what they had no framework for seeing is a waste of energy I need for other things." Marsh was quiet. Then, "Your father, Henry Holloway. I need to tell you something I didn't say in front of Bennett." She turned to look at him fully. "I didn't just hear rumors about the commission," Marsh said. "I was approached for it first, 31 years ago. A man I didn't know came to my office and described a project, a vault system unlike anything in conventional practice, frequency-based recognition, single-operator design built to last 50 years without maintenance. He offered a number that was frankly obscene." He paused. "I turned it down." "Why?" Grace said. "Because the man who came to see me wouldn't tell me who the client was. And in this business, an anonymous client on a one-of-a-kind build means the thing you're building is meant to hold something that can never be found." He held her gaze. "I turned it down, and they found your father instead. And your father said yes." Grace breathed through it, carefully, making room. "Did he know?" she asked. "When he took the commission? Did he know what it was for?" "I don't know," Marsh said. "But I think knowing what I know now about how Cross operates, your father figured it out. And I think whatever he put inside that vault alongside the mechanism he put there deliberately, as insurance, As a record. He paused. As a message. Grace put her hand in her pocket and touched the folded receipt. For me, she said quietly. Marsh didn't answer, but his silence was the answering kind. At 11:45, Cole came to find her. He came alone, which was unusual enough that she noticed it immediately. He came to the east corridor, her corridor, the one she'd cleaned 1,000 times, and he stood with her in the quiet for a moment, before he spoke, and she recognized that he was doing something she hadn't seen him do before. He was being careful with what he was about to say. Cross has a man inside the Marlowe Bank, he said. We confirmed it 20 minutes ago. Building security been there 4 years on Cross's payroll the whole time. He's been flagged and he's being handled, but it means Cross has known the vault's location and access points this entire time. Then why hasn't he moved on it himself? Grace said. Because he can't open it. Cole's voice was even. Same reason we couldn't. He's been waiting for someone who could, and then planning to take it from them. He looked at her. He's been waiting for you, Holloway. He just didn't know your name yet. She absorbed that. The idea of being waited for by a man like Victor Cross, a man who erased people the way other men erased chalkboards efficiently completely, without looking at what he was removing. How long has he known about me? She said. Since the war room meeting yesterday morning. We have a leak. We're managing it. Cole's jaw tightened slightly on those last 3 words. The point is, when we walk into the Marlowe Bank at noon, Cross will know we're coming. Then what's the plan? The plan, Cole said, is that you open the vault fast enough that it doesn't matter. She looked at him. And if I can't? He met her eyes. You already told me you could. I told you I was ready. Those aren't always the same thing. No, he said. But in my experience, the people who understand the difference between those two things are the ones who actually deliver. He paused. Your father built something that has lasted 30 years and resisted every expert who ever stood in front of it. That kind of work doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from somewhere specific. He looked at her. It came from him. And whatever he passed to you, you've been carrying it this whole time without even knowing what you were carrying. Grace felt something move through her chest. Not grief, not quite. Something more complicated. The specific ache of being known accurately by someone you didn't expect to know you. We should go, she said. Yes, he said. They went. The drive to the Marlowe Bank took 11 minutes. Grace sat in the back of the vehicle with Cole on one side and Marcus on the other, and she held her hands flat on her thighs and breathed, and did not look at the city going past the window because she didn't need the city right now. She needed the sequence. She ran it again in her mind. 7 beats, 3rd and 6th accent, palm contact, maximum surface area. No hesitation between beats 4 and 5, because that was where the mechanism tested for confidence. Her father had explained this without explaining it in the way he explained most things, by making her hold a clock mechanism and feel the movement. Hesitation reads as error, he had said. The machine doesn't forgive doubt. Give it certainty even when you don't have it. She had certainty. She had decided to have it on the same morning she decided to stop being invisible, and she was not going back on that decision now. They entered the Marlowe Bank through the service entrance. 4 of Cole's men deployed through the building in patterns she didn't try to track. It was their job, and they were doing it, and her job was different. She kept her eyes forward. Marcus led them down a stairwell she'd never been in, through a corridor that smelled of concrete and old money, and then through a door that opened into a room she'd never seen but had heard for 3 years. The vault chamber. The Iron Saint stood at the far end of the room. And the moment she walked through that door, the frequency hit her like a physical force. Not sound, not vibration, but something between the two. The specific resonance of a mechanism that had been waiting for a particular kind of hearing. And Grace stopped walking for exactly 1 second because the recognition was so total and so sudden that it knocked the breath out of her. It sounded like him. It sounded exactly like her father's hands on metal. The specific cadence of his mechanical thinking, made tangible, made permanent, made into steel and spring, and the particular tension of a system designed to last 50 years in the dark, waiting for someone to come. Holloway. Cole's voice. Quiet. She started walking again. She stood in front of the Iron Saint, and she put both palms flat against the door, and she closed her eyes, and she felt the rhythm come up through the steel, into her hands, the way it always came through walls and pipes and bedrock. Except now, there was no substrate between them, no distance, no 3-year remove. Just her hands and her father's work, and 30 years of silence waiting to end. Behind her, she heard the door open. She heard a voice she didn't recognize say something sharp and hard. And she heard Marcus respond, and she heard Cole say something in a tone she had never heard from him before, controlled but underneath it, the specific tension of a man who has just seen a problem arrive that he hasn't fully solved. She did not turn around. She kept her palms on the steel and she began. The first beat. The second. The third accent harder the way her father pressed into a mechanism when he wanted it to register intention. She heard a commotion behind her. Voices rising. The specific percussion of men moving fast in a confined space. Someone said Cross's name. Fourth beat. Fifth, no hesitation. Give it certainty the machine doesn't forgive doubt. Grace. Cole's voice. Different. Urgent. We have a problem. Sixth beat accent seventh. And then the sound changed. The Iron Saint made a noise that was not mechanical and not musical, but somehow both a deep settling resonance like a chord being released after 30 years of held tension, like a breath being let out by something that had been waiting too long to breathe. Grace opened her eyes. Behind her, the room had become something else entirely. 2 men she didn't recognize were against the wall with Cole's people on them. Marcus had his gun out. And standing in the doorway, unhurried with the particular stillness of a man who has been playing chess while everyone else played checkers, was someone she had never seen before, but recognized immediately from the quality of how everyone else in the room had reacted to his presence. Victor Cross had arrived. He looked at her across the room with eyes that were doing the same inventory Cole's eyes did, but colder the inventory of a man who was not calculating her worth, but her threat. He looked at her hands still on the vault door. He looked at the vault. He said very quietly, "Step away from it." Grace did not step away. The Iron Saint shifted behind her palms. The mechanism was moving. 30 years of held tension releasing in sequence component by component. The way her father's most precise work always moved not fast, not dramatic, but absolutely irreversibly certain. "I said step away," Cross said. "It's already done," Grace said. And the Iron Saint opened. The sound the Iron Saint made when it opened was nothing like Grace had imagined. She had imagined something mechanical, something final. A click, a release, the functional language of a lock completing its purpose. What she got instead was that resonance, that deep-held breath chord, and then a series of smaller sounds layered inside each other components, releasing in a sequence so precise and so deliberate that it took her 3 full seconds to understand that her father had designed the opening itself as a message. Not just the lock. The unlocking. The rhythm of release was the same 7-beat pattern played back. An echo. A confirmation. The mechanism saying in the only language it had, "I know you. You got it right. You came." Grace pressed her forehead against the vault door for exactly 1 second. Just 1 second. That was all she allowed herself. Then Victor Cross said, "Move her away from it," and the room erupted. 2 of Cross's men came off the wall fast, not the ones Marcus had pinned, new ones from the corridor, which meant Cross had come with more people than they'd counted, and someone had missed the count. And that was a problem that was happening right now, while the vault door swung open behind her, and Grace had to make a decision in about half a second about whether to stand her ground or move. She moved. Sideways, not back into the angle between the vault door and the wall, which put the open vault at her back, and Cross's men having to come around the door to reach her, which bought approximately 4 seconds. Cole was already in motion. She had not seen Cole Bennett move at speed before. She had seen him deliberate, controlled, occupying rooms with the particular stillness of a man who had never needed to hurry because things arranged themselves around him. What she saw now was something different, fast, decisive. The kind of physical certainty that doesn't come from training alone, but from years of situations where being slow had consequences. He put himself between Cross's advancing men and Grace in a single movement that was almost geometric in its efficiency. "Cross," he said. His voice had not changed. It was the same flat, controlled instrument it always was, except that now it carried a frequency underneath it that Grace recognized as the human equivalent of what the Iron Saint had just done, a warning signal precise and unmistakable. "You're in my operation." Victor Cross had not moved from the doorway. He was, Grace realized, a man who had built 30 years of power on the principle of never moving when he could make other people move instead. He was older than she'd expected, late 60s trim, with the kind of face that had been handsome once and had settled into something more durable, more dangerous. He looked at Cole the way you look at a piece on a board that has done exactly what you anticipated and is therefore not surprising. "Your operation," Cross said pleasantly, "has been running on my timeline since the beginning. You just didn't know it." He looked past Cole to Grace. "What's inside it?" "I don't know yet," Grace said. "I just opened it." "Then step aside and let my people find out." "No," Cole said. Cross looked at him. Something moved in his expression. Not anger, not surprise. Adjustment. The look of a man recalculating a variable that has behaved unexpectedly. "Cole," Cross said, and his voice dropped the pleasantness and became something older and quieter. The voice of a man who had known Cole Bennett long enough to use his first name and have it mean something. "You don't know what's in that vault. I do. And if you knew what I know, you wouldn't be standing between me and it right now." "Tell me what you know," Cole said. "That's not how this works." "It is today," Cole said. "Because today you walked into my operation with 4 men I didn't invite, and that means you've made this personal, and when things get personal, I stop being professionally courteous." Cross looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at Grace. "Ask her," Cross said quietly. "Ask the girl what her father really built. Not just the vault, what he built for me before the vault. Ask her what Henry Holloway's real specialty was before I gave him the commission that made his reputation." Grace felt the question hit her somewhere below the rib cage. "Don't," she said. Not to Cross, to Cole. "Don't ask me that yet. Let me see what's inside first." Cole glanced at her. A single look that covered a lot of ground: assessment, decision, trust, and then he nodded once. "Marcus," he said. Marcus stepped to the vault door and pulled it fully open. The silence that followed was the kind that happens when a room full of people who were prepared for several possible outcomes encounters one that was not on any list. Inside the Iron Saint, there was no money. There were no gold bars, no bonds, no the physical artifacts of 30 years of organized crime that everyone in that room had been expecting in one form or another. There was a steel shelf, and on that shelf were 2 things. A set of files, physical documents, the old kind, paper in folders, the kind of records that existed before everything went digital, and therefore could not be remotely wiped. And beside the files, a small mechanical device, no larger than a cigar box, that Grace recognized immediately and completely, in the way you recognize something you have been told about, but never seen, the way you recognize a face from a photograph. Her father's handwriting was on a label affixed to the top of the device. 4 words. "For Grace. She'll know." The room went very quiet. "Get the files," Cole said to Marcus. Cross moved for the first time. Not toward Cole's men, toward Grace. He crossed the room with the unhurried confidence of a man who was used to being the most dangerous person present, and he stopped 3 feet from her and looked at her with something in his face she hadn't expected. It wasn't threat. It was need. "That device," he said quietly just to her. "Do you know what it is?" "Yes," she said. "Then you understand why I need it." "I understand why you want it," she said. "That's not the same thing." He held her gaze. "Your father built me a location system. 31 years ago, before the vault, before any of this. A mechanical tracking network, no electronics, no signal, nothing that could be intercepted or jammed. Physical nodes distributed across 12 sites. The device in that vault is the master reader, the only thing that can tell you where all 12 nodes are and what they're tracking. He paused. Do you understand what I'm telling you? You're telling me my father built you a way to keep track of people without them knowing, Grace said. Powerful people, Cross said. People whose movements I have been monitoring for 30 years. People who would very much like that device destroyed. And my father put it in the vault, Grace said. Which means he didn't want you to have it anymore. Something flickered in Cross's face. The first real thing she'd seen there, not calculation, not control, but something that lived underneath those things. Something that might have been in a man less armored called regret. Your father, Cross said, made a decision I didn't authorize. He decided that the information the device contained was too dangerous to remain in private hands. He put it in the vault, and he sealed it, and then he stopped. And then you had him removed, Grace said. Cross said nothing. Where is he? Grace said. Her voice was steady. She had practiced being steady for 11 years. Where is my father? He's alive, Cross said. The words hit her like a physical thing. She had known it. Reyes had told her the flag in the federal database, the reclassified file. She had known it intellectually, held it as information, processed it as data. But hearing it said out loud by the man who had done it in this room with her father's handwriting 3 feet away on a label that said her name. The knowledge moved from her head into her body all at once, and her hands were shaking before she could decide not to let them. She put them flat against her thighs. Her father's technique. Ground yourself in a flat surface. Feel the solidity. Where? She said again. Negotiable, Cross said. Not with me, Cole said. Cross turned to look at him. Cole had moved without Grace noticing. He was close now, within arm's reach of Cross, and his posture had the particular quality of a man who has decided that the conversation has reached the point where words are almost finished. The files, Cole said. The device, her father's location, all of it, on the table, right now. You're not in a position to— I have 4 men in this building and 2 outside, Cole said. You have 4 men, 2 of whom Marcus is currently babysitting against that wall, and 1 of yours, who was on the building security staff and is currently being held in the facilities room on the 2nd floor, which you don't know yet because you haven't heard from him in 20 minutes. He paused. So yes, I am in a position. Cross looked at him for a long moment. Then he did something that surprised everyone in the room, including Grace thought himself. He laughed. It was brief and genuine, and it changed his face entirely. For the 2 seconds it lasted, made him look like a different person. Younger, less armored. Someone who had once been capable of finding things funny before 3 decades of operating in the dark had burned that capacity down to an ember. Cole, he said, you have no idea what those files contain. Then explain it to me. They contain the financial infrastructure of 11 legitimate institutions. Banks, insurance companies, a hospital network, 2 universities that have been for the last 25 years the primary laundering mechanism for 4 separate criminal organizations, 2 of which you have personally done business with. He let that sit. Not as leverage against you, as context. Because if those files go to the federal government, the collateral damage will take down things that neither of us can afford to lose. Cole was quiet. Grace was not. Agent Reyes, she said. Every head in the room turned to her. Treasury Department, she said. She's been outside this building for the last 40 minutes. I texted her when we left the Bennett house. She looked at Cole. I'm sorry, I should have told you. Cole looked at her. His face did something she couldn't fully read. It moved through several things quickly, and what it landed on was not anger. How long have you been running 2 tracks? He said. Since Wednesday morning, she said. Since she came to me. She held his gaze. I told her I'd give her access to the vault contents. I told you about Cross's surveillance. I was trying to give both of you what you needed without losing either angle. What does she want? Cole said. The files. The financial records. The laundering network. Grace paused. Not the device. She doesn't know about the device. Cole looked at Cross. Cross looked at the device. The room held its breath. And then Marcus from across the room said in a very controlled voice, "We have a problem." Everyone looked at him. He was holding the top file folder open. He turned it so Cole could see what was inside. Cole looked. His expression did not change, which meant the information was bad enough that his control was the only thing standing between the room and chaos. "What is it?" Grace said. Cole took the folder from Marcus. He looked at it for another moment. Then he held it out to her. She took it. The document on top was a contract, dated 31 years ago. Formal legal language, the kind that is designed to be enforceable, even when it's describing something that should not be enforceable. It was a commission agreement for the construction of a mechanical tracking network and a corresponding vault system. Standard enough except for two things. The first was the signature at the bottom of the client line. It was not Victor Cross's name. It was a name she recognized from news coverage and Chicago civic life, and the kind of institutional presence that is so large it becomes invisible, a name attached to hospitals and universities and financial institutions, and a particular brand of legitimate power that had nothing on its surface to do with organized crime. The second thing was the witnessing signature on the right side of the page, her father's name, Henry Holloway. And beside it in handwriting, she would have recognized anywhere in the handwriting she had carried inside her like a fingerprint for 11 years. A note added after the fact in the margin. They lied to me about what it was for. When I understood, I put the truth here. Grace, the device reads the nodes. The nodes track the people. The people are named in the back pages. Find Reyes. Trust Bennett. I'm at the place we used to call the middle. Grace read it twice. Her father's voice in the text clear as the frequency through the walls. The middle is where the truth lives. Her hands were shaking again. She let them. The place we used to call the middle, Cole said, reading over her shoulder. He looked at her. What does that mean? It's something he used to say to me, she said. Her voice came out different than she expected, smaller, younger, stripped of the 11 years of careful maintenance. About where to look. About where to keep your eyes. She swallowed. He's telling me where he is. Where? Cole said. She looked up. Her eyes were dry. She had decided they were going to be dry. Midland, she said. There's a machine shop on Midland Avenue in Pilsen. He worked there for 20 years before he disappeared. He used to call it the middle because it sat exactly halfway between our apartment and the lake. She paused. He's there. Or he's been left there. Or there's something there that tells me where he is. Cross had gone very still. If you go to that address, he said quietly, you will find things that cannot be made public. That's not your decision anymore, Grace said. She looked at Cole. He was already looking at her. Something passed between them in that look that was not simple, that had no clean name, that was built from 3 years of her being invisible in his house, and 2 days of being the most visible person in every room she walked into, and 1 morning in a kitchen where he had poured a glass of water and actually seen her. It was not a romantic thing. It was something older and more serious than that. It was the look of 2 people who have been against all logic on the same side of something dangerous, and who have both just understood that the dangerous thing is not over. Marcus, Cole said without taking his eyes off her, get the car. He took the folder from her hands. He took the device from the shelf carefully with the specific respect you give something built by someone's father. He handed it to her. Carry it yourself, he said. She held it in both hands. It was heavier than it looked. Her father's work always was. From the doorway, Victor Cross said, This isn't finished. No, Cole said. It's not. He put his hand briefly once on Grace's shoulder. Not a grip, not a restraint, just a point of contact. The kind that means I see you, and you're not alone right now. And then they walked out of the vault room together, and the Iron Saint stood open behind them, for the first time in 30 years, breathing the same air as everything it had been keeping safe. Outside, the city was still Chicago. Still moving. Still indifferent. But Grace Holloway was going to Pilsen. And this time, she wasn't cleaning anyone's floors when she got there. The drive to Pilsen took 19 minutes. Grace held her father's device in both hands the entire way, and did not speak, and did not look out the window, and did not allow herself to think about what she might find when they got there. Because thinking about it would open a door she needed to keep closed until she was standing in front of the actual door and had no choice. She had learned this discipline at 14, the week after he disappeared, when a social worker had sat across from her in a government office and explained in careful language that the investigation was ongoing and she should prepare herself for several possible outcomes. And Grace had understood in that moment that preparation was a trap, that if you prepared yourself for the worst, you were already living in it. And the worst hadn't happened yet, and might not, and you needed every cell in your body pointed toward function, not anticipatory grief. She had functioned for 11 years on that principle. She was going to function for 19 more minutes. Cole sat beside her, and said nothing, which was the right thing, which she noted without surprise, because he had. She was learning an unusual instinct for what situations required. Marcus was in the front passenger seat running communications in a low voice she didn't try to follow. 2 other vehicles were behind them. Reyes had confirmed by text that she was 6 minutes out from the Midland Avenue address with 2 agents, which meant Grace had a 6-minute window when she got there before the federal presence made everything more complicated. 6 minutes. She could do a lot in 60 seconds. 6 minutes was an eternity. The vehicle stopped. She was out before Marcus finished saying her name. The machine shop on Midland Avenue looked exactly like every version of it she had carried in her memory for 11 years, which meant it looked smaller than the memory, because memory inflates the spaces where important things happened, makes them cathedral-sized to match the weight of what occurred in them. It was a low-building industrial, the kind that had been functional for 40 years, and had stopped trying to look like anything other than what it was. The sign above the door was still there. Holloway Machine and Repair. The letters had faded, but they were there. Her father's name on a building. She had not let herself think about that in 11 years either. She pressed her palm flat against the door. Not the vault listening gesture, just contact, just needing to feel something solid. Then she opened it and went inside. The smell hit her first. Machine oil and metal shavings, and the particular dry warmth of a space that has had engines running in it for decades. A smell so completely her father that for a full second her body believed he was about to walk around a corner, wiping his hands on a shop rag and ask her how school was. The grief of it was enormous, and she walked straight through it the way she walked through everything, without stopping, without looking at it directly, keeping her eyes at the middle where the truth lived. Cole was 2 steps behind her. She could feel him there without looking. The front of the shop was empty. Tools on the walls in their outlines the way her father had always kept them, each tool traced in marker on the pegboard, so you always knew immediately what was missing. Half the outlines were empty. The tools themselves were on the workbench in use recently, because the metal shavings on the bench surface were fresh, and the machine oil on the nearest wrench had not fully dried. Someone had been working here, recently. "He's here," she said. Her voice came out completely steady, and she was almost angry at it for that, because inside she was not steady at all. Inside she was 14 years old and terrified and certain and falling. Grace. Cole's hand on her arm. Not gripping, just there. She heard it before she saw it. From the back of the shop behind the heavy curtain that divided the customer area from the working floor, a sound. Rhythmic. Mechanical. The specific cadence of a man working a hand tool on a piece of metal, the patient repetitive motion of someone who has been doing precise work for so long that it has become the same as breathing. She pulled back the curtain. Henry Holloway was sitting at a workbench with his back to her, working a file across a piece of steel, with the focused, unhurried attention of a man who had nowhere else to be and nothing else he needed to do. He was older. She had known he would be older. 59, now 60. Perhaps the math was simple, but knowing it and seeing it were 2 different countries. His hair had gone fully gray. His shoulders were the same width, but carried differently the way weight distributes after years of a particular kind of living. His hands moving on the metal were her father's hands exactly. Those had not changed at all. She said, "Dad." He stopped working. He did not turn around immediately. He put the file down on the bench with the same careful placement he had always used, tools returned to their proper positions, even when you were interrupted. Even when the interruption was your daughter's voice after 11 years of silence. He put the file down, and he put his hands flat on the bench surface, and she recognized that too. Grounding yourself in a flat surface, feeling the solidity. And then he turned around. His face was her father's face. Older, yes. Marked by 11 years of whatever his life had been. But her father's face, unmistakably the face she had carried as a reference point for everything that meant safety and precision, and the particular kind of love that expresses itself through teaching rather than sentiment. He looked at her. She looked at him. "You heard it," he said. His voice was the same. That was the thing she hadn't prepared for, the voice being exactly the same. "I heard it," she said. He stood up. He crossed the distance between them in 4 steps, and he put his arms around her, and she let him. And for approximately 30 seconds, Grace Holloway, who had been invisible and then visible, and then the pivot point of a 30-year secret in the span of 4 days, was simply a daughter whose father was holding her, and she allowed that to be the only thing happening in the world. Then Cole said quietly from behind the curtain, "We have about 4 minutes before federal agents walk through that front door." Her father pulled back. He looked past her at Cole, and his expression moved through recognition and calculation in a way that told Grace he knew exactly who Cole Bennett was, and had known for some time that this moment, or a moment like it was coming. "Bennett," her father said. "Mr. Holloway," Cole said. "Your daughter opened the Iron Saint this morning." "I know," Henry said. "I felt it." He said this without explaining it the way he said most things he considered self-evident, and Grace understood it immediately. The device in her hands, the master reader, had registered the vault opening. He had built a notification into the mechanism. Of course he had. What came out with her? "The files," Grace said. "The contract, the financial records, the client list." Henry looked at her steadily. "And the device." She held it up. He looked at it in her hands, and something moved across his face. The particular expression of a man seeing his own work carried by someone he built it for without knowing he was building it for them. "Cross," he said. "He was there," Cole said. "He's been managed. For now." "For now." Henry repeated with the tone of a man who knows exactly what that qualifier is doing in a sentence. He looked at Cole directly. "You understand what those files contain? The full scope of it?" "I'm beginning to," Cole said. "Then you understand that Cross is the smallest problem in that room." Henry sat back against the workbench. He was looking at Cole with the assessing look Grace recognized, not her father's version, not Cole's version, but the same underlying process. 2 men who navigated dangerous systems taking the measure of each other honestly. The client who commissioned the vault. The name on that contract. That person has been the silent infrastructure of this city's criminal economy for 25 years, and the reason they've stayed silent is that no one has ever been able to connect them to anything in writing. "Until now," Grace said. "Until now," Henry agreed. He looked at her. "That's why I put the files there. That's why I built the vault the way I built it. Not for Cross. Not to protect his information. To hold it. To make it accessible only to someone with the right language, the right knowledge." He paused. "The right inheritance." Grace felt the word land. "You built it for me," she said. "I built it knowing they were going to erase me," he said simply, without self-pity, with the same precision he applied to everything. "I figured out what the tracking network was really for. I figured out who the actual client was and what the financial infrastructure supported. And I knew that when I put those files inside that vault, I was signing my own removal order." He held her gaze. "So I made sure the only person who could ever retrieve them was someone they would never think to look at." Someone invisible. The word landed in the exact center of Grace's chest. He had made her invisible on purpose. Not as a cruelty, as a protection. As the most precise and heartbreaking kind of love, the kind that turns a daughter into a key, and then hides the key in plain sight, and trusts the key to find the lock when the time comes. She couldn't speak for a moment. Cole spoke instead. The federal agent's outside, Reyes. She can be trusted. She reached out to me 6 weeks ago, Henry said. She found the classified file. She's been working this independently for 2 years against significant institutional resistance because the name on that contract has reach inside Treasury too. He looked at Cole. Which means whatever happens next has to happen fast and in the right sequence, or the information gets buried again, and this time they won't make the same mistake twice. What's the right sequence? Cole said. The device, Henry said. The master reader. It doesn't just locate the network nodes. It contains a complete operational record, every person tracked, every location logged, 30 years of movement data for every major player in the financial criminal infrastructure of this city and 14 others. He looked at Grace. That device in your hands is the most complete record of organized criminal activity ever assembled. It's not a tracking tool. It's a confession. Every person it ever monitored left a record of exactly where they were and when, which means it corroborates everything in the files without requiring a single witness to testify. The weight of the device in Grace's hands became suddenly different. She had known it was important. She had not understood the scale of it. Cross knows this, she said. Cross built it for the original client and then realized too late what he'd created, Henry said. He's been trying to contain it ever since. He's not the architect of this. He's a man who made a deal 30 years ago and has been managing the consequences ever since. A beat. Not unlike several other people in this room. Cole said nothing. His jaw tightened slightly. I'm not pointing fingers, Henry said. I'm pointing at the problem. The problem is the name on that contract. Everything else, cross the vault, the network, it's all peripheral to that one name. The front door of the shop opened. Reyes came through it with 2 agents Grace didn't recognize, and she stopped when she saw the room. Henry at the workbench, Grace with the device, Cole standing in the space between them, like a comma in a sentence that hadn't decided yet what it was saying. Reyes looked at Henry. Mr. Holloway, she said. Agent Reyes, he said. You've been here the whole time, she said. Not an accusation, an assessment. Cross's arrangement was that I would stay available, Henry said. Available was a flexible term. I've been here for 6 years. Working, waiting. He looked at Grace. Listening. Reyes looked at the device. Her eyes stayed on it for a moment too long. That's the master reader, she said. Yes, Grace said. I need it. I know, Grace said. But not yet. Reyes looked at her. Ms. Holloway. The name on the contract, Grace said. You know it. My father knows it. Cross knows it. And someone inside your institution knows it too, which is why your independent investigation has been hitting walls for 2 years. She held the device steady. If I hand you this right now, without the right safeguards in place, it disappears into an evidence locker, and the wrong people manage what comes out of it. She paused. You told me yourself this goes higher than Cross. Which means it goes higher than the people who would normally handle evidence of this kind. Reyes was quiet. What are you proposing? She said. My father built a system that runs on frequency and pattern, Grace said. No signals, no electronics, nothing that can be intercepted or remotely wiped. Whatever we do with this information needs to run on the same principle. Redundant, analog, distributed. She looked at Reyes, then at Cole, then at her father. 3 copies of the files. 3 separate destinations. 3 people who hold partial information and can only complete the picture in combination. She paused. Cross can't buy all 3. The network can't silence all 3. Not simultaneously. Silence in the room. Then her father said, She's right. With a tone of complete simplicity, the way he'd said it when she was 10 years old, and had correctly diagnosed a problem in a clock mechanism he'd been puzzling over. Just, she's right. No elaboration necessary. Cole looked at her for a long moment. You've been planning this since Wednesday. Since Tuesday, she said. Since I heard the 25 experts failing and understood that the problem wasn't the vault. The problem was that everyone was trying to open it for the wrong reasons and with the wrong tools. I started planning the right reason and the right tool the same night. The right tool being you, Cole said. The right tool being what my father left me, she said. I'm just the person who knew how to carry it. Cole nodded slowly. He reached into his jacket and produced the contract, the original document from the vault, the one with the name she had not yet said out loud. The client signature that connected 25 years of shadow infrastructure to a face that appeared in civic galas and hospital dedication ceremonies and university board meetings. He put it on the workbench beside Henry's tools. I want one of the 3 copies, he said, and I want it understood that my holding it is not charitable. It's mutual insurance. Whatever that name goes down for, I need the record to show I'm on the right side of it. Grace looked at him. You are on the right side of it, she said. You have been since Tuesday night when you postponed Thursday. Something shifted in his face. Not the inventory look. Something more human than that. Your father built something that lasted 30 years, he said quietly. That's a rare thing. Most things people build don't last. They cut corners, or they get tired, or they compromise the design to meet a deadline. He glanced at Henry. He didn't compromise it. Not once. It worked exactly as designed for exactly as long as it needed to for exactly the person it was designed for. Henry Holloway looked at his daughter. Of course it did, he said. The next 2 hours were the most methodical of Grace's life, which was saying something. Files divided and photographed and copied by hand and distributed with the specific care of people who understood that the thing they were handling was more explosive than any weapon in the room and would do more damage and needed to be aimed correctly, or it would destroy the wrong things. Reyes worked with a focused efficiency Grace respected. Cole's people provided logistics without asking questions that weren't their business. Henry worked alongside his daughter at the bench. His bench, his tools, his hands and her hands on the same surface. And every few minutes he would say something small and technical about the device, and she would understand it immediately and completely. And neither of them mentioned the 11 years, because the 11 years were inside everything they were doing and didn't need to be named. At 3 in the afternoon, Marcus appeared in the doorway, with the particular expression he wore when something had happened that required immediate attention. Cross, he said, to Cole. He's made a move. Pressed a contact in the federal building. There's going to be an attempt to reclassify the vault discovery as a national security matter, which would pull jurisdiction out of Reyes's hands and put it somewhere more manageable. Reyes pulled out her phone. How long do we have? 2 hours, maybe 3. That's enough, Grace said. Everyone looked at her. She was holding the device. She had been holding it for 4 hours, and she understood it now in the way she understood everything her father built. Not just mechanically, but entirely the philosophy of it, the intention built into its design. She understood what it could do, and she understood the most efficient way to make sure it could not be unmade. The device doesn't just store records, she said, it transmits them. That's what the nodes are for, not just to receive location data, but to hold it and relay it if the master reader signals them. My father built a dead man's switch into the network. If the master reader sends a specific signal, every node releases its complete stored record simultaneously to whatever address the master reader specifies. The room was completely silent. Henry, Reyes said carefully. Is that accurate? I built it as insurance, Henry said. In case Cross tried to destroy the device. In case the records were threatened. The network releases everything simultaneously. It can't be stopped once the signal is sent, because the nodes are distributed across 12 sites, and they don't require the master reader to complete the transmission once it starts. Where do the records go? Cole said. Wherever I tell them to, Grace said. She looked at Reyes. Give me 4 addresses, 4 journalists, 4 people you trust, who are outside the institutional structure that Cross can reach. Reyes stared at her. If we do that, the name on that contract is in 4 independent newsrooms within 40 minutes, and no reclassification order in the world stops all 4 of them from publishing simultaneously. Grace held her gaze. Cross can't buy all 4. The network can't silence all 4. Not simultaneously. She was using her own words back. The principle she had stated 40 minutes ago, now with a mechanism to support it. Reyes took out her phone. She made a call. She spoke for 3 minutes in a voice too low for Grace to follow completely. Then she ended the call, and she recited 4 email addresses to Grace slowly and clearly, and Grace entered them into the master reader using the input sequence her father had built into the device mechanical analog, a series of component settings that could not be hacked or jammed or remotely disabled. She looked at her father. He looked at the device, at her hands on it, at the way she had read the input system without being shown. "You knew the sequence," he said. "You taught me," she said. "You just didn't know you were teaching me." He put his hand over hers on the device, both of them holding it. His hands and hers the same shape, the same instinct, the same inheritance passed through 11 years of walls and pipes and a frequency that traveled through bedrock because it had nowhere else to go and no one else to find. "Send it," he said. She sent it. The master reader made a sound small, precise, the 7-beat pattern inverted, played back as output, rather than input release, rather than recognition. And 30 years of records moved through a mechanical network across 12 sites and arrived in 4 independent newsrooms in 38 minutes, and the name on the contract arrived with them. By evening, it was on the front page of every major outlet in the country. By evening, Victor Cross had gone somewhere no one could immediately locate, which Reyes said was not unusual for a man who had spent 30 years being unlocalizable and was not a permanent condition. By evening, Grace Holloway was sitting at her father's workbench in the machine shop on Midland Avenue, with a cup of bad coffee, and her father 3 feet away, and Cole Bennett leaning against the wall with his jacket off, and his November eyes doing something she had never seen them do before. Resting, just resting, not assessing or calculating, just occupying a room without performing anything. "You're going to need a different job," Cole said. "I know," she said. "I have a use for someone who can hear things other people miss," he said, professionally, legitimately, mostly. She looked at him. "Mostly." "Mostly," he said, and the corner of his mouth moved in a way that was not quite a smile, but was something in the same family. Her father looked at Cole, and then at Grace, and said nothing, which was its own kind of statement. Grace put her coffee down. She picked up the device lighter, now its records released, its 30-year mission completed. She turned it over in her hands. On the bottom, in her father's handwriting that she had not noticed before, because she had been focused on the top, were 4 words that were not a label and not a technical notation. She heard it. Good. Grace Holloway had spent 11 years being invisible because an invisible girl was safer than a visible one. And then she had spent 4 days being the most visible person in every room she walked into. And the distance between those 2 states was her father's voice in the walls, and a frequency that did not stop traveling just because the person who sent it had been taken away. She set the device down on the bench beside her father's tools, in the exact center where he always put things that had finished their work and deserved to rest. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer just the girl who heard machines. She was the woman who had opened the iron. Saint released 30 years of truth into the world and brought her father home from the middle and the Mafia world. The criminal infrastructure, the shadow architecture of a city that had run on silence for 3 decades, would never sound the same again.